What's up, Wizards? It's Igby, Devs in Space. And yes, I know I sound exactly like him. It's just a weird coincidence. Don't worry about it. We've got way too much to go over today to be wasting time worrying about stuff that doesn't matter. There are a ton of far-out Galaxy Brain cards in Edge of Eternities that I think, me personally, Igby, will affect Standard and even beyond. So today, let's go over the 20 absolute best ones.
And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech.
And we're back. Thanks for handling the intro there, Igbezius, and thanks for rescuing me from outer space. I was getting in trouble, but you warped out there. You brought me back to the couch. That's what happened while the theme song was playing. You guys missed it. It would have been awesome if we could have afforded to film it. But either way, also thank you for sharing your opinions on the cards in Edge of Eternities. Opinions that I share with you, man. There's a lot of really powerful cards in this set, but doesn't appear as though everyone shares that opinion with us, which is wild. I'm not sure that I'm seeing the same set that a lot of other people seem to be seeing here. There's a ton of impactful cards in this thing that honestly make me feel downright Cosmo naughty. That's bad. But you know what? Forget about that joke. Just go ahead and put it out of your mind, and I will too. We'll all do ourselves a favor. Let's go ahead and get to the honorable mentions here. Now, I've got 5 of them this time around because, you know, I couldn't just not make a top 25 in disguise. There's a lot of cards in the set I want to talk about. And there's some cards that are obviously really good, but I just don't really feel like putting them on the main list, like the Shocklands. That's an honorable mention. These are probably the actual most impactful cards in the entire set, but I kind of hate putting reprinted dual lands on an actual list. So here, Shockland, I'll at least mention them. They're obviously really, really good. But you know what else is? All the removal in the set, but if I were to put like each individual amazing piece of removal in the set on the list, it'd be like a top 70 or something like that. We'll get there one day, but honestly, I just kind of wanted to shine a special spotlight on some of the stuff like Pinnacle Star Cage, which is our new temporary lockdown, but it's an artifact. There's also Beyond the Quiet, which is new Sunfall. Boo, yes, but it's still a pretty good card, obviously. There's also incredible white removal in this set, like Seam Rip. Everyone's talking about this. Hard Light Containment, fewer people talking about it. But they both look great, and they both work really well with the Pinnacle Star Cage I just showed you, right? Because Seam Rip and other enchantments don't get swept up by your Pinnacle Star Cage, so you can play them in the same deck, unlike, say, a Temporary Lockdown would work with a Seam Rip or a Hard Light Containment. Hard Light Containment's especially good with Pinnacle Star Cage, because you play Star Cage on 3, and then on turn 4, if they manage to land a large threat, just take it out with a Hard Light Containment and staple the containment to your Star Cage, thus making it a little bit harder to remove. So again, these work really well, and they can both get searched up by a Bright Glass Gearhulk, which is another nice wrinkle. These are crazy good. As far as other 1-mana removal spells go, we got a sort of replacement for Cutdown and Tragic Trajectory, which is sorcery speed, but I still think it'll see a lot of play. And then there's less obviously good removal the first time you read it, stuff like Reroute Systems and Depressurize. I just had a conversation with Power Dragon the other day about how good I expect Depressurize to be, and I won't repeat all those points here, but needless to say, I expect it to be very good. And if you think about it for a second, you'll realize why. Because it's good, but there's also Reroute Systems, which can protect your creatures or destroy your opponent's creatures, which I think is a pretty sweet combination of things to have on one card for a single mana. So again, lots of incredible removal in this set. I didn't want to have to put each individual one on the list, because again, just like Shocks and other duels and stuff, it just kind of feels boring. These again are among the most impactful cards in the set for sure. But, you know, they're just kind of like normal Magic cards at the end of the day. Like, oh, remove your guy, remove your thing. You know, I want to look at stuff that has real impact on a game. And to that end, let's go ahead and look at my real honorable mentions. I don't know how far we are into the video already. I apologize profusely, though. My actual honorable mentions begin with Entropic Battlecruiser. I don't have too much to say about this, because like most of my HMs, I just don't have all the faith in the world. It's a real standard card. But it does have this going for it. Lowest station cost in the entire set, at least on the first ability. And that's the only one I really care about, because once you've got one station into this thing, then suddenly whenever your opponent discards a card, this thing bolts them. It's like a Megrim effect on steroids, which is actually really sick with all your Bandits talents, your Duresses, and beyond, right? And it's not going to be too hard to station this down. Your one Deep Cavern Bat you're probably already playing in discard can do it, so like that about it. But there's a bunch to like about this, because, you know, there's a ton of cards your opponent might be playing that make them discard cards. You know, Fear of Missing Out, Tersa Light Shatter, and beyond. There's a ton of cards people play right now that'll force their own discards. So this is really good against anybody sort of incidentally playing those cards. And again, there's a bunch of really good cards that are played in Standard that'll make the opponent discard their own cards. So it seems okay there, but we're still worried it's slightly slow. So I'll move on to Biotech Specialist, my second honorable mention here. A lot to like about this, just a 2-mana guy that gives you an artifact token is cool, and landers kind of equate to ramp, so 2-mana body that ramps. Sure, it's kind of fine, but the best thing about this is that it pops your opponent for a couple points of damage whenever an artifact leaves, so pretty gross if you can get things to work, and we have tons of artifacts in standard we can work it with, treasure tokens especially, but also landers, which card is kind of nudging you towards, but clues and maps and beyond, plus a bunch of cards that'll let you sacrifice artifacts. So I don't know, might be something to him because he's so cheap and he works really well in multiples, but I worry that setting this card up is more of a streamer thing than a pro tour thing, so we'll see which way the wind blows on it, but I want to know because the card looks awesome. But I guess my last honorable mention here is Tanuk Memorial Ensign. I don't know if this is great either, but I guess I have sort of the most faith out of all of my honorable mentions that this is all right, especially now that we have this and Sabotur and Iridescent Vine Lasher, like all in the same format, 1, 2, 3 on the curve, which is just absolutely nasty. And this will draw you a bunch of cards. Fabled Passage, draw a card. Evolving Wilds, draw a card. And beyond. Escape Tunnel, draw a card. He's probably a great commander too, but commander people, you'll get your video in a couple of days. We're not talking about that here. As far as standard goes, standard brawl, but again, in actual big boy pants pulled up standard, I think this could be fine given the right circumstances. I just have to have that again proven to me. But let's get to the actual list. Number 20 is, as usual, an extension of the honorable mentions. I imagine I've said that so often at this point that at least 3 of you watching said it along with me. So this card's not going to be one that you want to take too seriously, but maybe one that you should. At the same time, maybe you should take Devastating Onslaught just a little bit seriously. Not only do I like this because it has my name in it. Any card that's like Devastating, I pop for that, but still. Devastating Onslaught has a lot of work it could at least potentially do. It's not necessarily doppelgang. As a matter of fact, the more I hear people make that comparison, myself included, when I watch the preview video back, I'm like, well, it's not that. It's just not doppelgang, but it is a much more aggressive version of a card like doppelgang, and a big red deck could get down with that, whether you're copying a bunch of Terror of the Peaks or Overlord of the Boiler Bilges. I can't ever say that name. Overlord of the Boiler Bilges. Nailed it. There's gross stuff you can do with it, but we'll see if the decks can actually do that stuff. I feel like if you have any of the cards I've just mentioned out, you're probably already winning the game anyway. So we'll have to wait and see if this thing actually fits into any decks. But giving the things haste is kind of nuts if you can time things right. But we'll see if this thing can actually get leveraged correctly or if there's just a million decks better than it. And I'm kind of verging towards the latter, but I'm rooting for it. Now, my number 19, I got to level with you, was actually the most contested slot on like the entire list. I knew Devastating Onslaught was going to be 20. As far as 19 went, I had to kick a bunch of cards off the list because they can't all be number 19. And in the end, I settled on Station Monitor. Kind of a weird pick, but it's mostly out of respect for Corey Stillcutter. Maybe a weird sounding sentence, but this is yet another 2-mana thing that once you've cast your second spell in a turn, can put a creature on the table. In this case, not a prowess guy, but a flying guy, which in some cases could be way better. That said, Station Monitor is a lot harder to cast. You can't play it in the same color decks that you could have played Corey Stillcutter, and it's a lot easier to remove. So I think this is a really fixed version of a Corey Stillcutter that's probably no better than like a third path Iconoclast. And as much as I loved that card, it never really did much in standard, and it's going to rotate in like 3 days. So, I'm just not sure that this is really as good as I want it to be. But again, the fact that it makes flying creatures might make an enormous difference. Once it makes the second or third one, you could easily be winning the game off of them. So I do like the card, but again, this is mostly a concession to how good Corey Steele was. And when you see a card that's even remotely like that card, you got to be like, hey, it's probably all right, so it made the list. Now, my number 18 is Mightform Harvester, which has received crickets, mostly since it was first previewed. Surprises me. This was almost on my sleepers list, but eventually I was just like, nope, you're going on the main list. You are valid, sir, and I think it is. Especially considering it works best with creatures that sort of already have the ability it grants. Right now, Tifa and Mossborn Hydra work gangbusters with this card, work pancakes with this card. I don't even know what that means. It just sounds right with this card. If you're basically doubling either of their power and toughness twice in the same turn, they're probably just going to win the game right then and there. But I guess Harvester has a lot of other stuff it could do. You just play it on like turn 4 with the help of a Llanowar Elf, then drop your land for the turn, and then suddenly you're like Pugnacious Hammerskull is a 12/12. Like, it seems like an okay play. Like, whatever 3-drop you played ends up being huge if you end up taking that line. So I don't know. Again, too much that I like about this. Again, it could be good in Commander, but I'm going to try not to say the C word too much in this video. I think that this could actually be good in competitive environments, namely just Standard. But I do think it could have a lot to do there. Maybe the landfall decks don't want to play a 4-drop like this, but again, there might be plenty of decks that do. It might just be in a Timmy. It could be. I'm not sure. That's why it's number 18. Number 17 is another card I kind of have to check myself on, because you know me. If I could just make the Orzhov Legend number 1, I would. But again, I am trying to kind of check my expectations on Sir Vondom just slightly. I see a lot of people going goo-goo bananas over this card, and I'm just not absolutely sure that it's quite there, but I do think it's pretty impressive. I like the Knight stats on it. You know, it's 2 mana for a 2/2 with a couple of keyword abilities, and that's great. But it also has the ability to eventually blow away non-land permanents, which is what everyone's going crazy about. He also grows whenever your stuff dies or gets put into exile, which I think is all right. But again, once he gets big enough, I think the best part of the card, and maybe one of the best parts of any card in this set, is that he's going to do the blow up a non-land permanent thing, even if he gets put into exile, which I think is just a little bit wild. So again, a lot to like about this, but I'm not going to overblow it as much as I see some other people doing. I see some people going absolutely wild over the fact that you can blink this card, but you know, you blink him, he blows something up, and then you have to start the work over again to get him large enough to blink him again to blow something else up, and I'm just pretty sure that is likely too slow. But at the same time, there's a lot I do like about the card. He works very well with Katramos. Maybe in the life gain decks he's okay because he triggers your life gain effects. He might be decent with like Raise the Past Aristocrats decks and stuff. So there's a few places this guy can go, and we're going to try him there. But did somebody say Aristocrats? Here's Dev, everybody. Number 16 is Umbral Collar Zealot. Of course, yeah, this is the better black 2-drop. I'm pretty sure in this set, man. It's just wild that we finally got like a real free repeatable sacrifice outlet, this time that's not legendary and which can be played in a lot of different color combinations. I'm a big fan of El Barto. Bartolomé del Presidio is a card that I will never tire of saying the name of. I'm sure a lot of people hate me saying the name of, but one way or the other, man, Bard is a great card. We've had a lot of good times together, and we'll continue having those times. But instead of being a 4 of in our Aristocrats deck, and we have to get him or we lose, now we can play 4 Umbral Collar Zealot and maybe 2 or 3 Bards, and now we have a ton of these sacrifice outlets, all of which are really, really cheap. And in the case of this, works really stupid well in like Raise the Past decks. I'll bring that card up again because just like Snarling Gorehound, right? Now we have another card that allows us to surveil fairly easily in that deck, and again, it's Raise the Past. We don't mind sacrificing creatures to put them in our yard. We just get them back in the first place. So maybe this helps us find the Raise the Past. Maybe this helps us put the Starscape Cleric or the Hinterland Sanctifier into our graveyard so that it can be reanimated. There is a lot to love about this little lady. So big fan of Umbral Collar Zealot. We've needed a card like this in Standard for it feels like years since like Woe Strider. We haven't had actually a card like this, and in this case, we even get a discount off of what a card like this would normally cost, which you gotta love. And it opens up those Rakdos, you know, sacrifice decks. Just really fantastic card that I'm pretty sure is going to see a fair amount of play before it's all said and done. But my number 15 is Himm of the Faller. If you're counting, this is the 3rd black 2-drop in a row. It shouldn't be surprised. You know what you get when you're coming to my list. You know what colors I like, but this is obviously a really good card. You know, I don't have to, you know, apologize for this one too much or for my proclivities too much when I include this card, man. This is one that I don't think enough people are on, right? It's effectively kind of a Night's Whisper if you're doing it right. But even if you're not doing it right, it's still a black card that surveils 1 and then draws a card, which you might just be into, depending on when you get it in the game. Rip it off the top of your library, you're kind of cycling it, added a surveil. That's okay, but you know, if you can't actually power up the card all the way, then suddenly 2 cards for 2 mana is a ridiculous deal. And again, don't forget the surveil. You get to kick that in, maybe fuel some graveyard shenanigans, or just like blow past a crappy land or whatever it is. So surveil 1, draw 2 is, you know, it's like better than Chart a Course, and that's a card that sees a fair amount of play in Standard for various reasons. Sometimes you want to discard the card, but either way, just draw 2 for 2 mana is a rate that will always be playable in Standard. So I'm not sure what exactly it goes into, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if it showed up somewhere during its tenure. Now, my number 14 is Famished Worlds Sire this time around, a card that I was not too hot on until somebody in my chat pointed out that, you don't look at cards on the top of your library equal to the number of lands you control. You look at cards from your library equal to this thing's power. So if you play it and you sacrifice 4 lands, and suddenly its power is 12. Did I get that right? 3, yeah, it's 12. So you look at the top 12 of your library, and you'll probably get 4 lands to replace the 4 lands you sacrificed. And I'm assuming that you're cheating it into play with like a Reanimator spell or maybe a Smuggler's Surprise. If you do surprise it into play, that's where things get incredibly spicy. Because, you can do it on your opponent's turn and trigger all your landfall stuff during their combat step or their end step, which could be really good. And that is what this card does. It triggers landfall, like a lot. If you reanimate this sometime in the mid-game in your landfall deck, there is no telling how many triggers you're going to get. A lot of good stuff about this. I don't think that it's instantly the best reanimation target in Standard, but I do think that you're approaching reanimation or ramp or Smuggler's Surprise or whatever from a different angle, and there might be a lot of good things about that different angle. So World Sire looks pretty crazy to me. Number 13 is Sunset Sabotur, one of my favorite names for a card in the entire set, and one of my favorite cards in the set, it turns out. Mono Black gets a 2-drop like every single set. Like Mono Black Aggro specifically gets a 2-drop in every set. And at this point, I'm not sure which is the best one. Like 3 sets ago, it was like, boy, all these 2-drops are terrible. Mono Black Aggro just can't exist. Now, at this point, just fast forward like 2 months, Mono Black Aggro is one of the better decks in the format. It's like a B- tier deck or something. And Cecil just came out in Final Fantasy, made the deck a million times better. And now we get this to play in our Cecil decks, which is insane. Your opponent might not even have a creature to put the +1/+1 counter on. Maybe they're a control deck. Maybe you've got removal spells in your black deck. A novel concept, I know, but I assume Ward Discard a Card is kind of incredible on this thing too. I just want to point that out so that I know it's on the card. In any case, this just kind of does a lot of great stuff without looking like it does much. I think some people are going to look at this and be like, ooh, that's a terrible downside. And yeah, it kind of seems that way, but I don't think it's near as bad as it looks. My number 12 is Cosmog Zenith, mostly again out of respect for Corey Steelcutter and other people's opinions. This is one of the most expensive cards in the entire set, outpacing just about every legendary land in the set. Are they legends? Either way, all the lands that are supposed to look like old lands that are in this set, only one of which made this list. Place your bets on which one it is. But in any case, this outpaces even the shock lands and a bunch of other cards in the set that are meant to be chases in terms of pre-order pricing. And I know you're not supposed to go off pre-order pricing, but again, it's proportional. Like all the cards are expensive, so I'm just surprised that this is more expensive than a lot of cards in the set right now, but apparently a lot of y'all have faith in it. I'm not 100% sure that I do, but I will acknowledge that just on turn 4, being able to play this into Opt or Burst Lightning or something like that is pretty nuts. You get a bunch of PT on the board the turn it comes into play. You can just kind of repeat that process on subsequent turns if it's not killed. Again, I think that some people have Corey Steelcutter eyes for this thing, and I'm not sure that I have those. I think more than Corey Steelcutter eyes, I cut my eyes at it. Just, are you really the real deal? But we'll see real soon if it is, and I think that there's a chance it might be. Number 11, which is, of course, will you say this one with me? The honorable mention for the top 10 is Arch Enemy's Charm this time around. This card does too much to not be playable, which I guess a lot of content creators, myself included, have said about the last, 2 standard playable, charms that we've seen. We all wanted the green charm especially to be really good, and it just didn't really do much, which is kind of wild. It was a good card. I swear to this day it was a fine card. But Arch Enemy's Charm, this does way more than the green one, I think. It's like a mini Gix's Command for less mana. It's a little bit harder to cast, technically, I guess. Theoretically, it's harder to cast, but still, I don't mind too much. Just a year or so ago, we saw that people were paying a bunch of black mana for Invoke Despair in a 3-color deck. We do lose the pain lands, we do lose the fast lands to a degree in the upcoming sets, so mana's not going to be quite as easy to make, so that might hurt this card a little bit. That's realistic, but again, the card does lots and lots of stuff. Whether it's, you're behind, you need to kill that guy, you're behind, you need to get your guys back, or you want to put yourself a little bit farther ahead, or you're behind, so you want to use the lifelink mode. Again, if you're behind, the card is good, and if you're ahead, the card puts you even farther ahead. So I just don't really see a downside apart from the mana. But we have cracked the top 10. Congratulations, everyone. You're still watching the video. Thanks. Number 10 is Nova Hellkai. Now, of course, in Spanish, Nova means it does not go, but I think this actually does go in a ton of decks. Mostly, mono red, but we're talking about a bunch of different red decks here, whether it's mono red aggro, which I do think this goes pretty well in, but also obviously goes in big red decks, goes in dragons decks. There's a number of Rakdos decks. I think this could even fit pretty well in. Fast decks will probably like 4 damage to the dome on turn 4. So I just think that being able to almost assuredly do 4 damage to them on turn 3 is not necessarily good enough, but once you know that you're gonna, always have a 5-drop at your disposal for the rest of the game, that seemed like a pretty good ace to have in your back pocket. So kind of a huge fan of this for a bunch of different, whether hardline aggro or very mid-range decks. I think there's a lot of ways to leverage this. But my number 9 is the final uncommon on the list. What's it going to be? It's Timeline Color. Old Edward Cullen. Old Macaulay Color over here is actually a pretty slick little card, man. I've talked about Aristocrats a couple of times in this video, and I promised that I wouldn't bring it up over and over. Well, that was yesterday. In the Sleepers video, I said I wouldn't bring it up over and over. I made no promises today in the Sacrifice decks. There's plenty of ways to have creatures that say, gain you a life whenever a creature comes into play. So that means that you could effectively loop this. There are no other creatures in Standard, really, that you can do that with. Like Forsaken Miner can really only come back when you commit a crime, and that's not going to happen like super often, and the other creatures that can come back from your graveyard, like say Bloodghast, they require a land drop, so you're not really going to be doing too much looping. But with this, you can warp it out of your graveyard, pay a couple of lives, sure, put it right onto the table, and then sacrifice it to some effect to get some sort of, death trigger. Like, let's say you've got a Vengeful Blood Witch on the table, and maybe a Hinterland Sanctifier. If you can do that, well, you gain a life when the color goes to the graveyard after the sacrifice, and then when you warp it back into play, you gain a life off of Hinterland Sanctifier. So again, you're neutral at this point. And you can effectively just loop color infinitely and eventually kill them with Vengeful Blood Witch. So all it takes is a sack outlet and a couple of different creatures. Sounds like a 4-card combo, and it technically is, but at the same time, it's all pretty decent in Raise the Past decks, which already have a combo. I usually like combo decks that have 2 or 3 combos apart from the main combo, and Aristocrats looks like it's finally going back to being that kind of deck, and it's getting the pieces. They knew that Aristocrats needed like a 2-mana free repeatable sack outlet, so we got it. And they apparently also knew, especially with some of the cards leaving, that we would need a card like this that we can actually loop and play like baby commander combos in our standard deck, and I think this is a great way of doing so. My number 8 is a Stelly Reclaimer, and I hope I'm not overrating this, but I think that it's a pretty stellar card, man, especially in, say, let's call it like a Boros mid-range deck or something. And I know that I'm theory crafting live on air here, which I'm not sure you're supposed to do, but one way or the other, you could always play some sort of Tormenting Voice effect, or maybe like a Fear of Missing Out on turn 2 to pitch a card into your yard, and then warp in a Stelly Reclaimer on turn 3, go ahead and get that card out of your yard. I think that's just a good line in and of itself, but starting on turn 5, you might be able to get like 5-drop artifact and enchantments or planeswalkers out of your graveyard, which is crazy. If a Stelly Reclaimer comes down on turn 5, stapled to, say, an Elspeth Stormslayer, I think you've got enough mana value and power out of one play for one turn. You also get a pretty sizable flyer on top of whatever you get back. I mean, don't forget that now they have to deal with the flyer, which is easier said than done. So I think there's a lot to this card. And once we actually sit down in the lab with this and think about all the different lines you can take to get cool stuff back with it, I think we'll return with some kind of amazing decks. But my number 7 is a card that does not really require going into the lab with at all. My number 7, Smash. It's Frenzied Baloth, and it just loves to break stuff. This is just 2 mana for all of that. I don't know how it's only 2 mana for all of that, man. What's going on? Like, it has trample and haste and 3 power, and it can't be countered, and now other stuff can't be countered, and like, Well, combat damage can't be prevented. Is that it? You can't fog stuff? There's like another ability on this that's easy to forget, but there's like a bunch of lines of text. They just keep coming for only 2 mana on this. I'm not sure. I'm still not sure, even with this card, if mono green Stompy is a deck, right? Like, does mono green landfall slot this in? Is it just a sideboard card against Azorius control so they can't counter your Tifas and Hydras and stuff? Maybe. But still, it'll see a lot of standard play, even if that's the only application it gets. But if Stompy's going to be a deck, it's by and large going to be because of this card. And if Control is not going to be a deck, it might also be by and large because of this card. Now, my number 6 is that land I promised you. Which one is it? It's Adasia Windswept Bastion. Yeah, there are lands in this set meant to crib designs from Gaia's Cradle and Tolarian Academy, but I still think that this is easily the best one for standard, and it's got multiple homes to slot into day one. The trick here, the tricky part at least, is probably going to be stationing the card, but I think there's a few decks that could reasonably do it, and it fits well in those decks. Mono white, for instance. We were just talking about this deck. This can copy Caretaker's Talent and a number of other, artifacts and enchantments and stuff that are in that deck. It can also copy a Pinnacle Starcage, which I think is an interesting line. But in Simulacrum Synthesizer, this looks all right too, man. Like, obviously it copies synthesizers, but it copies repurposing bays as well, and it can even copy Starcage in that deck if you wanted to. And in that deck, you'll probably have a bunch of big constructs, meaning it's probably a little bit more easy to actually station this thing to the level you need to. So great in both of those decks, and it could lead to some really, really funky decks where you're copying artifacts and enchantments. We've seen where that can lead with like 3 blind mice. So there's probably some weird, like, janky lines you can take. Just altogether, not the best card in the world, right? But I still think that this has got like subtle work to do in standard and has a super low opportunity cost in terms of including it in your deck. So again, man, you see something like this, I pop for it. I'm not sure you do, but both as kind of a jank lord and as a a guy that actually looks at competitive Magic from time to time, I'm pretty excited about this card because I think it has work to do. Now, my number 5 is Pinnacle Emissary, and I think this illustrates the fact this isn't strictly a standard list. This is a list of the best competitive cards in the set, because I think this is probably better in older environments, right? Places where you can play like 0 mana cost artifacts. This gets way, way, way better, and I guess we have like Mox Jasper in standard, but I really don't think you're doing that. However, in older formats, you are playing like actual Moxen, so the card is crazy with those. But even in standard, I think it could be really, really good, where it kind of gives you like a version of the 3 mana Saheeli's trigger, and I always liked her, but they fly, that's really sick. They can't block unless they're blocking flyers, but who cares? Again, I want to get aggressive with this thing, and I think that honestly, in this case, warping it in for just the 1 mana can be really beneficial in standard, where you get a bunch of, Thopters or whatever they're called, drones, off of it the same turn it comes into play, off the warp. But then playing it from exile after you warp it only costs 3 mana. That's not that much. I mean, you probably have to back it up by a turn, play it on turn 4 or something, then play a 1-drop artifact to go ahead and get that value off of it. But still, that's not too much to ask. And if you untap with this on the table and some cards in your hand, you can do some real damage with it if your opponent hasn't had a chance to remove it yet. So yeah, I think this is a very real Magic card. But it is not yet the pinnacle of cards in this set. So let's look at number 4 here, Exalted Sunborn. It will always sound like Sunburn. I will probably mispronounce this as Sunburn over and over for the next 2 years. So, get ready for that. But yeah, again, reminder, not a commander list, strictly a competitive list. And I think this could be a pretty standard playable card right here. This is basically just more copies of Elspeth Stormslayer in your white decks, and you probably want like a non-legendary Elspeth Stormslayer. It's crazy. This is not legendary. How was it not legendary? Multiple copies of this gets fun mathematically very fast. But, along with Elspeth Stormslayer, it's already pretty fun mathematically. And for what it's worth, Elspeth has been seeing a lot of play post-bans, and she might see even more play after rotation, where most of the good removal in the format just happens to be white. So again, Elspeth might be in the future, and if people are playing her, I imagine this is going to be right behind. Not to mention, just like Esteli Reclaimer, once you actually play the card, you also get a huge flyer, in this case with Lifelink, which is a really good ability. This brick walls a ton of aggro decks, and once it brick walls them, it starts burying them in tokens that either block their guys or just, overwhelm them on offense. So a lot of great stuff about this card. It's fairly difficult to remove with damage-based removal at least. It can't be depressurized. That might matter at some point in the format. So I don't know, man. There's a lot of things to like about this, the least of which is probably the 4/5 flying lifelink body. But if that's the worst thing about the card, if that's the floor of the card, is that you just get that, pretty good floor, and at the ceiling, it's freaking Anointed Procession, which has proven that it can be good in Standard. But top 3, everybody, and every now and again a content creator has to point his bat over the left field wall, like just call one. And this time around, it's going to be Synthesizer Lab Ship. I am very afraid of this card. I have said Corey Steel Cutter or some variant of that a couple of times in this video, both on Station Monitor and Cosmog Zenith. But of all the cards that give me that same horrible feeling in my spine as Corey Steel Cutter in this set, Synthesizer Lab Ship is easily the greatest of them. A single blue mana for this. And even though it might not be the lowest station cost in the set, it is the second lowest. To get the good ability on this, sure, it can eventually attack, but I don't really care that much about stationing it all the way up to whatever that number even is. I don't care what that number is. 2 is the number I care about on this card, because it will not take very long at all whatsoever to start actually making 2/2s literally every turn on a permanent type that's actually kind of tough to remove. And we have tons of different artifact tokens in this set that we can make 2/2s. You can play a creature on turn 1 and get an artifact 2 or 3 different ways in this set. And I don't mean an artifact creature. I mean the creature makes an artifact that it also puts into play. There's at least 1 or 2 of those in the upcoming environment. So that seems okay to me, whether it's Spyglass Siren or Novice Inspector or whatever. But, if you just play a 2-drop guy that has 2 power and puts an artifact on the table, well, then suddenly I guess you'll be attacking with that artifact on turn 3, right? When you play your Synthesizer Lab Ship. And you'll still have 2 mana up for shields or another play or whatever it is. This costs an insanely low amount of mana, has an insanely low station cost, and for that matter, to that end, kind of looks extremely pushed to me, like they wanted this to be the good spaceship or something. And I'm, again, not sure if I'm completely crazy here and I'm just making the wrong call, but I'm pretty sure this card is wacko, yakko, and dot. I might be just whiffing on the T hard on this card, but I don't think so. I think this is easily one of the best cards in the set. You're going to be seeing it a lot, but we'll go ahead and move on here to number 2, which is yet another blue card that I think is going to be freaking everywhere. It's Consult the Star Charts, which I think instantly becomes far and away the best card draw spell in Standard. And that is in a Standard that includes Stock Up. So again, I might be saying something I could be slapped for right now, but I think Consult the Star Charts is too much, man. I mean, it's basically 2 mana for an instant speed, kind of a sleight of hand, if you play it on turn 2, I guess. And that's whatever. I guess that's fine. But if you play it later in the game, it becomes unfreaking stoppable. It becomes like Dig Through Time later in the game. It becomes a much better version of a Pillage the Bog, which is kind of already a fine card. But if you're playing this on turn 5, let's just say, at the end of your opponent's turn, you're looking at the top 5 and getting the best 2, which is unbelievable. We usually call that Stock Up, but you can play this one at instant speed for a mana more, which is dope. But, if you want to later on in the game, the best thing about the card is how it scales. Once you have 7 or 8 lands out, and that's realistic in your control deck, some people are going to be like, come on, to have 8 lands. Yeah, your control deck. So 8 lands on the table that's every game, And I think this slams the door on most opponents once you have that many lands. If I'm looking at the top 7 of my library and getting the best 2 at the end of your turn and immediately untapping my lands, if I'm the opponent playing against that, spirits completely sink into the ground. There is no way I'm beating whatever you just put in your hand. Absolutely not. So it's like playing its Memory Deluge in that way. You know what I mean? You remember when your opponent would play the second Memory Deluge on turn 12 and you don't have any cards in their hand and in your hand, and they have the best 2 from the top 7 of their library. Well, this works basically exactly the same as that card worked, only, it doesn't cost 1 million mana the second time you cast it. You can't cast it twice. But you get what I'm saying. This is going to look at 1 million cards late in the game and get the best 2. And that has proven to be an almost unstoppable line on a lot of card draw in the past. But we have reached it, everybody. My number one card for competitive play in the set. And if it's better than the last couple of cards, it must be a doozy. And I think it is this time around. It's Lightstall Inquisitor. Perhaps. I'm going to stick to my guns here. The best one-drop ever printed. Now, it might not be a Ragavan or even a Deathride Shaman or a Birds of Paradise. You know, there are a lot of really good one-drops in Magic the Gathering, which I'll acknowledge. But I think this enters the top 10 at the very least immediately. And again, I think it's got a shot at the title, baby, at the podium, right? This thing. I will also acknowledge this. During the preview for this card, I initially kind of got it wrong. I thought that you could choose the card, which would make it broken. But your opponent gets to choose the card that gets put off by a turn. And I still think, even with that mistake that I'll acknowledge here, that it's still one of the best one-drops ever printed. By far. I think this thing is wild. First of all, it's a Savannah Lions that they also slap Vigilance on. I'm not sure how good Vigilance is on a 1-toughness creature, but like, it's got that. Didn't have to have that, but anyway, I think that putting them off a land by a turn, or putting them off, a removal spell by a turn, putting them off their 2-drop by a turn, putting them off maybe they have a 5-drop in their hand, and now they're like, well, I wasn't going to cast that anytime soon anyway, so I might as well tax it, and they just never get to it. Like, these are all plays that'll have a profound effect on every game state. Just overall, a wild card that is going to force a very difficult decision on a lot of opponents. I mean, I've already kind of gone over some of these, but it is a big deal to put them a turn off their 2-drop or their sweeper or whatever it is. So, love it. Just cannot help but love this dude. And I think that, again, maybe the farther back you go, the better this guy actually gets in terms of formats that you can play in Magic the Gathering competitively. But even in Standard, I think this instantly becomes one of the better one-drop options. And if you go this into, say, Deep Cavern Bat, you are destroying their plan really fast and really in a very irritating way, which I think will be really, really good in upcoming Standard. But that is it for this one, y'all. I've still got one more list for Edge of Eternities before we get to deck techs and stuff. It's going to be the top 10 Commander cards from the main set. I've already done the top 10 cards from the Commander set or whatever that was, so go check that video out. That should be fun. But I've still got one more list for this one, so make sure you subscribe for that one and all of the other content. I have to cover more Spider-Man cards that have come out just this afternoon, so that'll probably be out tomorrow at some point. But then there's other stuff. I'm supposed to do like a top 10 rotating cards that could have been contenders, but I'm not sure I'm going to have time to upload that to YouTube before rotation happens. So we'll see what happens with that. I might upload it to Patreon as like extra content if you're a Patreon. So if you want to be one of those, if you're a patron, go on over to patreon.com/SBMTG and sign on up. It's only $1 a month at the lowest, and that will allow you access to like vote on decks for Edge of Eternity Standard and content beyond that as well. I still haven't done the Commander deck I wanted to do, the patrons picked like a month ago when Final Fantasy came out, but we'll get to that one soon enough. I'm sure there's probably going to be an Edge of Eternities Commander deck before it's all said and done too. But anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I just hope you enjoyed this video. And if there's anything I didn't bring up in this one or the sleepers list, let me know down there. Because again, I kicked a few cards off this list and I'm interested to know if you have some of the same cards in mind. And of course, like the video, I've already told you to subscribe, but why not tell you twice? And of course, you can do that with other people's YouTube channels. I don't really have anything else to tell you to do. I'm going to check out the Twitch or something, but make sure you subscribe to your favorite YouTubers. No one subscribes anymore. I see like really good MTG content creators that get like 20,000 views a video, but they only have like 15,000 subs. Sub to people you like. Why aren't you doing it? Sub to people. People just stop doing it. Sub to people you like. But anyway, that's all I've got for this one, guys. Hit me up in the comment section with any concerns or questions or cards you would have done. That's Allski Kowalski. I'm Dev from the Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.